I'm always looking for new ways to turn vocal loops into unique vocal chops and phrases, and I believe I've discovered a new technique in Ableton Live. So let me show you how this works. So this involves using the Ableton Live drum rack. I have an empty MIDI track over here. I'm going to go ahead and load in the drum rack. I'm going to load an empty drum rack onto this MIDI track here. And now I'm going to load in a sample in here, just one sample for now. So I have a collection of loops here. These are all vocal loops. Oh, another thing, the loops need to be in the same key. If they're not in the same key, you ideally want to transpose them and ensure they're in the same key. Otherwise, it's not going to sound very musical. All right, so luckily for me, all these loops are already in the same key. So let me just load in the first one here. I'll drop it into C1 over here. So this is just like a normal drum sample, except it's a vocal phrase. I don't want it to like play through the entire loop when I trigger it. So I'm going to switch to classic mode so we have access to an ADSR. I'll bring the release down close to about 50 milliseconds. All right, so that's just one sample. Now I want to populate this one cell with a whole bunch of other samples or a bunch of other vocal loops. So what we can do is we can right click on this one simpler instrument and group it. So now this is inside an instrument track. So yes, you can have an instrument track inside a drum rack. You can see here it says instrument track. All right, let's open the chain selector and you can see that one chain. And now let's drag in a whole bunch of other samples. I'm going to hold down Shift and select, let's say, this one here. So now we have this nice collection of samples and I'll just drag this right below over here. And now, as you can see, all these vocal loops are in that one drum rack being triggered on C1. Now this is going to sound horrible. Trigger them all at the same time. It's also going to be really, really loud. You can see I'm already clipping. So what I want to do is I want to trigger them on different velocity values. So if I click on velocity here, I can right click here and I can select distribute ranges equally. That saves me time to do this manually. All right, so now let's go ahead and create a phrase. I'll just create an empty MIDI clip here, create a pattern. This really doesn't matter. You can have continuous 16 notes, 8 notes, or create a pattern like this. But they do need to be different velocities. Right now, they're all the same velocity. I'll tap this randomize a few times. So it just kind of randomizes all the velocities for all the individual notes. And now let's have a listen. Now, if that doesn't sound too good, I'm going to tap the randomize button here. And now we have another phrase. Tap randomize again. Okay, so this sounds a little wonky, a little funny, but let's refine this further. So right now, we have different samples being triggered, but they're all triggering the very beginning of the loop. I would like to jump around to different parts of the loop because each loop is fairly long, sometimes 2, 3, 4, or 5 seconds long. So let's do this. Let's assign the start position of this one sample, whichever one that is. So there's a start option here, so start position. I'm going to right click and assign this to macro 1. This is the macro 1 inside the instrument track, not the drum rack macro 1, but the instrument track macro 1. All right. I want to do this for all the samples. It's going to take quite some time to do this manually. One thing we can do here is right click on the one that I've already assigned and select map to all siblings. So now this sample start is going to adjust the sample position, the sample start position for all the samples simultaneously. Now that's starting to sound a lot more interesting. Will be even more fun if this could be randomized automatically. So for this, in Ableton Live at least, LFOs are perfect. So let's look for an LFO and load that in. I'll drag that onto the same instrument rack cell. It pops all the way to the right over here. And let's map that to the sample start. I'm going to choose a random shape. So it's stepped, and I'm going to synchronize it to 1 bar. So every bar will hear a new phrase. To give this some context, let's put some reverb with the send, some delay. Let's also put some compression to make this louder because these loops are fairly dry. Turn on makeup gain here. Let's also add auto tune. Well, we have auto shift now in Ableton Live. Load an auto shift. I'm in E flat. All these samples are in E flat. So let's choose E flat here, which is D sharp. Set it to major. And I'll turn off smoothing so we get that hard quantized effect. Oh, one thing to watch out for with assigning an LFO to sample start, we don't have negative values for sample start. So this mod plus minus doesn't make sense. Maybe just activating plus. So we only get positive values. So right now the sample start is set to the lowest. And with the LFO, we basically go higher. I want to further refine this. I want to have the ability to also transpose the pitch of all these samples. So under controls here, we have transpose. So let me map that to macro 2. And I'm going to right click the same thing and map all siblings. So there's 20 of them. They all are mapped to this transpose here. So if I set this to 12 or negative 12, let me do this. I'm going to change this pattern to a very simple one where it's just the same 16th note, but of course velocities need to be different. Let's hear that. That sounds pretty cool. Now I also want the pitch to randomly jump around. So let's add another LFO. I'll just duplicate this one. I'll choose a square shape because musically speaking, octaves work best when you're randomly changing pitch as opposed to any of those in-between values. It's going to be out of key. So let's map this to the transpose control. Let's leave it at 12 for now. And let's change this from mod to just the control, the remote control thing. And let's close out some of these things so you can see it better. I'll close out the other LFO so we can see this. I was jumping from negative 48 to plus 48. That's a bit too much. 50 would be the middle point, which is 0. And 75 would be 2 octaves, I believe. Yeah, 24. So an octave above would be right in between 50 and 75, which should be 63.5? 62.5, yeah. 62.5. 63. And that sounds really, really cool. Let's put this further into context. I'm going to add another MIDI track here. Just load in a drum kit and see how this sounds like with a groove. Alright, so there you have it. That's my technique for creating vocal chops using Ableton Live's drum rack. Now you can always create vocal chops manually, and I also like doing that. But with this technique, you get almost endless variations on your vocal phrases. You can always swap out your vocal samples to get even more variations. I hope you found that interesting. Stay tuned for more.